Alder Haniro, would you like to call the meeting to order since you have rank?
Didn't we elect Alder College to be the vice chair? Or
Oh,
did
that's
I
true.
miss?
My apologies. That's true. Alder Kalish, you get the honors.
Oh, great. So not 100% sure what I need to do.
Well, just call the meeting to order and then.
Okay. Calling the meeting to order.
And then your next item would be to select a subcommittee chairperson. Maybe that would just be you.
And this is just for this, right?
Right. We'll
Yeah.
probably meet. I don't see us. Well, we'll see how this goes, but I wouldn't think more than a couple times, and hopefully maybe just this once. So we'll see.
Okay. And do we have any recommendations for subcommittee chair?
I'll recommend you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So then you would close, if there's no other nominations, then you would close the nominations.
Okay. Close the nominations. All those in favor of Alder Kalish as being the chair of the subcommittee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. All right. Next agenda item. Discussion action items on the active transportation plan community survey. So Mark, the intern took the comments and considerations from our last committee meeting and incorporated them. So you're going to go over those.
Yep. So this is the revised survey. And again, I'm sorry that she's not present. That was an oversight on my part, but hopefully she'll join us here. So at the full committee meeting, there was a desire to condense questions, keep it shorter. And I received some edits from a couple committee members that I forwarded to Nikki, and she incorporated them into what's before you now. So I'll turn it over to you for any continued feedback.
So I looked at this briefly in I like the changes that she made. Just one comment, and this isn't critical, like a make or break, but both questions 5 and 7, I just like to talk about those just real quickly. So so for 5, the way I read this, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but the way I read it is that someone could put very important for all of these. And then if you go down to 7, it's a very similar situation. So someone could put their top priority for all of them. And so it's just a question. I mean, do we want, more specific information? Like if someone selects top priority for every single one of these, is that giving us what we want? And is there a different way to ask this, or am I missing something and there's a good reason for for the way these are asked? Just a thought.
Yeah, I agree with that comment. And again, I would remind everyone, I really think we need to have a clear idea of what we're going to do with the answers to each of the questions we pose. And, I'm not suggesting that you write questions to get the answers you want. That doesn't mean we would write questions because we have specific content for the answers we want. Like we want to find out that people love transit or, whatever. That's not what we're after. I want to make sure that the questions that we ask provide data that we can then use in some way, in a meaningful way in the report, and not just to be able to say, X% of respondents said environmental impact was very important to them. I mean, that might be something we want to be able to report, but I just feel like I totally appreciate that Nikki reduced the length of the survey. I think that's important. I think we can still condense it a little bit more and maybe rephrase some of the questions. And I'll give an example. Let me find. It's towards the end. The question about, please, is it this one? I'm sorry, my notes are. Oh, okay. Question 10. On average, how often do you use the trails in Middleton each year? I would make question 10 something like, over the past 6 months, how often did you use the following to travel to, from, or within Middleton? And then list all the options, like, in a grid, so that it's bike, walking, public transit, micromobility, and then have daily, several, haven't even really looked at the answers to see if those are the right ones for us. But a question like that tells us how much people are using the different modes. And I think that is really what we're getting at with questions 1 and 2, right? How do you usually travel to work or school? Aside from work, school, how do you travel around the community?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, we've got 3 questions that are asking something similar, and I feel like unless we can articulate why we would want to have work and school separated from other destinations, unless we can identify why that's important for us to know, why not just ask the one question that combines questions 1, 2, and 10?
I like that idea a lot. Okay, so taking the frequency and maybe even this can be combined into a table.
Yep.
Okay.
And adding to question 10, and I know this sounds odd, but trail or path, should we include both? Because a trail as a mountain biker, I think of something unpaved. Path, I think of something paved. And I know that that's just going to be an odd term, but one I feel is more parks, one I feel is more commuter. I'm sure others are not going to think of that, but we do handle our park trails differently than we handle our commuter paths.
I think what we'll do, I think that's a good suggestion. So we could say unpaved trails and paved paths. We could just label them that way in our speech.
Great.
Yep.
That's
And
how-
I like how question 2 says, how do you travel around the community? I think that's an important way to phrase it, and to, maybe specify, what did I say? Something about, yeah, how often do you use the following to travel to, from, or within Middleton? Because that's, we want to make sure it's Middleton that they're talking about.
To travel to, or to travel around Middleton, or to, how did you say that?
I would say to, from, or within Middleton.
As opposed to just around Middleton? So to, from, or within Middleton. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I just have a general thought here. As I look through this, and it sort of builds a little bit on what Lisa was saying. When I think about, like, what is the purpose of this? There seems to me that there's really sort of 3 things that you're trying to get at, or we're trying to get at in this, right? One is what are the modes of transportation that people use? Second question has to do a lot with safety, feeling safe, or I'd say safety and accessibility to things, right? What do you use? Do you feel safe using it? And the others have to do with sort of the quality of trails, roads, sidewalks. I mean, I'm just as I think about ways to maybe condense it down, like you just did on that last one, Lisa, those seem to be the three things that when I read the questions, they seem to fit in one of those three categories. Maybe there's another one that I'm missing, but I just mention that as a grid to think about this. There might just be some ways to even, think of those three sets, because there's some overlap then. There are places where we ask that again in a slightly different way, and maybe it's not necessary.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're right, Stephen. If there is a fourth category or a fourth topic, it would be what are their priorities for, or what do they think Middleton should prioritize for?
Right. That'd be the last part. Okay. Given where we're at, where should we go next? And that goes back just the question earlier. We were question 6, and the question there, the issue there, it is currently I understand it to be a rank, and I'm assuming, Mark, that the way the survey would be set up, it is a rank. I don't remember what the survey service was, right? And in a rank, you can only put a 1 or 2, right?
Right.
You're forced to choose a number, right? So you can't rate them all 5s. You would, assuming that's what you want in order, right? You would have to either give it a 1 or a 2 or a 3 each one, correct?
I mean, that provides a different type of data, and it gets around the problem that I think you didn't quite hear at the beginning when you there was a concern from one of the members that somebody could say everything's important.
Right. But if you're forced the choice, right, you actually set it up as a rank, and it's
right,
you can only use each number 1.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of meaning to that, and you don't have to be, if there's more than 5 numbers, you could, if there's 7 components to it, you could have a rank of 1 through 7. So easy enough to do that.
And related to that, one of the things I wonder if you want to add to 6 as an area, and I don't, again, I'm new to all this, but I was wondering about metro or paratransit. Is that an issue as well, given how people travel? I mean, there probably are people who primarily travel that way, because we ask about that in other places, but for this question, we don't have that included. So that's just a suggestion, if that's something that you'd want to know that's not in there.
Which one are you talking about, Steve?
6, which is about.
Oh, I see. I see. Yep.
What's your preference? Although I will say it is a little funny, that question. As long as we started with that, I just wanted to go back. Maybe it's really, what are your preferred ways of traveling around the community? Rank from, your least to most preferred, rather than your travel priorities. That one I found a little fuzzy, but it's just, how do you like to travel around the community? What's your preferred way of doing it? Oh, I'd like to walk. Oh, if I can't walk, I take my bike. I'm just pretty straightforward.
Well, it also depends on distance that you're traveling. That's that sort of thing.
Well, it does depends on where you're going, but
right.
Of course, that's why it's sort of a general. It is a little fuzzy because it depends on where you're going. But I think people, because I'd say I'd like to take my bike if I could, or walk, but I can't do that. But that is a different question than which is what you do most of the time, right? Which I think we have earlier in there.
Good feedback.
Just to move, can I add I'll just go back to earlier. Just a question 2. It says, aside from work, school, how do you, and I would have probably add, usually travel around the community? Check all that apply. And then it says, or the most frequent method. And I guess I would say one or the other. I'm probably go with the former, check all that apply, but maybe you want to know what their most frequent method is. But I'm just thinking it's both. If you ask both, then I'm not sure what you get. You get a mixture of stuff, right? So you either want them to answer one thing, which is the most frequent, or everything that they do. So I just leave that out, whatever that is you're looking for. If you're looking for the most frequent mode of transportation, or everything that, but I'd say cut out one of those. Does that make sense?
Yep. The group had discussed that we should combine 1, 2, and question 10. 10 being the frequency question, this one right here.
Okay, sure.
So, and integrate that. It combines 1 and 2 because we don't need to distinguish between work, school, and other reasons.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the reason why, as I think about it, Alder Nairo, my guess is what Nikki was thinking here was separating out commuting from recreation. Or optional trips, if you will. I think that was, I think that was the thinking behind it. So if we don't feel that that's important to distinguish between essential and optional trips, if you will, then we can combine those and integrate the frequency.
So the only question I would have regarding that is, could that in the future affect funding? Because how our parks paths and trails are funded is differently than how our commuter paths are funded.
Okay.
If this, distinguishing between the two would be helpful possibly for future funding. I don't know if the city was looking at it. It depends upon how this is going to be used.
But okay, I'm struggling with essential trips versus like for recreation. So if I ride my bike to the grocery store, is that essential? What if I do it every day instead of driving once? So I have trouble with that. But then also, when I do ride my bike to the grocery store, I'm traveling on the same infrastructure that might be funded by, that the city funds because people commute on it. Do you know what I mean? So it's tricky.
I think the biggest question is, do we think that data will be useful? Because if we combine the two, you're going to get different information than you would if you segregate the two. Because for me, for example, for work, I'm going to say a vehicle, and that's it. But then not for work, it's going to be a bike, it's going to be walking, it's going to be. But if you combine the two, then you're not going to be able to distinguish those different methods that I use. You know what I'm saying? So it just depends on what we want. Kind of out of the survey.
I've got an idea. So this may be getting a little complicated, and we obviously want to keep it easy to understand. But I think what we do is we list different modes of transportation, and then we have one column for how for what purpose do you use that mode? Work, school, shopping, or errands, or recreation. And then the other one is how frequently. Is that getting too complicated?
I think it would be less complicated to combine question 1 and 10 and question 2 and 10. If we really want to separate out, because it could make sense to separate out work and school versus everything else. And then just have the same thing. I think you have to give, I wouldn't use the word usually because that too is subjective. So I would give a time frame like in the last 4 months or 6 months if we think people can remember. Or maybe if you do the same thing all the time, it doesn't matter. But people might be doing things differently in the summertime. So anyway, it could be how do you over the past 6 months, how often have you traveled to work or school by X? And then have that kind of table with the the commuting or the travel options in the rows and the frequency across the top, or the other way around. And then same thing, aside from work, school, in the past 6 months, how have you traveled to, from, or within Middleton?
How would you feel about using the interval of a year? And the only reason I say that is so that you capture all seasons, and also the Conservancy Lands Plan is using 1 year as a time frame.
That would be good.
Is that okay? I mean, if 6 months is important, I have no problem with that. I just 6 months basically from August back is to February. Whereas 1 year is, I don't know, a year just seems like a.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the fact that if the Conservancy is using it, that it matches. The hard part, of course, is the bigger the time frame, the less precise you'll be. But if you can have sort of some big categories again, I guess it'll give you some approximation. I mean, you don't care so much about precision. You just want to, right? I mean, you want to get some sense. Is this something that's pretty common or not common. I think do people use it or not? It may be something in between, but I mean, it's probably manageable. I mean, again, if you were looking for precision, not so much, but I think you could do that.
Okay. So how did you feel about question 3? Is this, and this doesn't matter if someone says very poor or very good for all of them. It's obviously not it's just providing feedback.
My-
Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, for me, one thing that sort of struck me was the question about congestion down towards the bottom was it's like I thought to myself, okay, how would I rate the quality of this Middleton congestion? So if there's a lot of congestion, do I say very poor or do I say very good congestion? Right, everything else it kind of works. Higher number.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
And congestion, I was like, I'm not sure how I'd respond. Whether I should put a 1 or a 5. So that's something about how to reword that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Think about that one. I'm trying to think how to reword it. Like there's a lot of congestion. Okay. Anyway,
I understand what you mean.
I think, well, I almost would take that one out.
well,
Because we have other ways of getting that information, which is, Sean Stowski putting down some of the things to gather data. But yeah.
I think
With question 3, with what we decided we wanted to gather information on with the survey, I felt that 3 should be abbreviated and that some things should be taken out, because I almost feel like we're opening up Pandora's box with some of those questions, and some may not directly pertain to what information we're trying to get from people. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think it does, and I would agree with that. And I still think, I raised this last time, I think it makes sense to group these either into separate questions or probably just keep them all together. But, ease of access by car is followed by bike, it's followed by bike, it's followed by pedestrian, then walking and biking, then roadways, which pertains to cars, pavement conditions and congestion. Well, I guess pavement condition of roads versus others, but I just feel like it's asking, this is the type of question that turns people off when they're
Yes.
going through a survey. So I would try to shorten this up and group it. And again, think about what is it we're going to do with the data we get from respondents.
When we get a finalized survey too, I was thinking it would be good for all of us to time ourselves taking it, and it needs to be under 10 minutes.
Yep.
Because I found with those surveys that if it's over 10 minutes, I want nothing to do with it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I agree with the sentiments of question 3 and all the surveys we ever put together and the ones that we do. We typically don't have questions this long because people are going to get to the 3rd or 4th one and say, there's a lot of reading here. And I don't know how many rows there, but there's a lot. So if we think that all this information is critical to gather, someone maybe we split it up or something, but this is a big one.
Okay. Good feedback.
I had a question about question 4. Again, what are we going to do with this information? Do you or a member of your household own any of the following? And maybe we can do something with it, but I'm again thinking in terms of the data we need to get from folks. Do we want to spend time asking this question? Or do we want them to spend time answering this question just so we can say only, around 14% of people own a bus pass or whatever it's going to be? I mean, again, could we get that information? Is it possible to get that information from Madison Metro?
And it would really only be the bus pass one that would not be answered in the other questions, because with the other questions being asked, we will know if people own a bicycle, if they answered that they ride a bike, or if they drive, they have a automobile. You know what I mean? It's already being answered in the other questions, other than the bus pass.
Yep.
I mean,
So we
that's
could just
what-
eliminate that completely,
Okay.
I think.
Maybe we could, maybe there's a way to integrate the bus pass concept somewhere else, asking if the city should provide a bus. Well, we'll just skip it. I think we just skip it. Yeah. Okay.
Question 7, please consider the possible public safety improvements. This one, yeah, I just don't know that reducing crime and reducing litter and graffiti are relevant. I think I would add, and someone else, Steph Moritz, noted, what does it mean to improving collaboration? I think I would add increase enforcement of driving laws, if that's not on there. Improving off-street trail safety, that is on there. On-street bike lanes. Yeah, but I think I would get rid of the litter and graffiti and crime. And add increased enforcement of driving laws, because that's the number one complaint I get from residents of District 6 now, is that they're, if you ever ride or drive on High Road or Pheasant Branch Road to, north of Middleton Hills, people just speed like crazy down the hills and up the hills. They just speed. And for the first time ever, I saw a police car setting up a speed trap at the bottom of the hill on Pheasant Branch Road. And I was like, wow, that's great, because all the time I hear from people, why do we let people drive 40, 45 miles per hour down that hill when it's supposed to be 30? So I think that is one we'll get a lot of responses from.
The other issue, and maybe we don't, but it's the one we talked about at the last meeting, was, because of all the construction, the obstruction of pedestrian access. Now, maybe we don't need it. On the other hand, goes back to how you might use it. And if you had data, you might be able to have an easier time with the police and saying, look, a lot of people are saying this is an issue. So something around that might be worth adding in too. I don't know how to exactly word that. That was something at the last meeting.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure what you mean by obstruction of pedestrian access. You mean like a barrier?
Weren't we talking about, because of all the new development on in the city, that the question is who enforces the rules regarding accessibility for pedestrian and bikes, because the contractors don't seem to follow the rules there.
Mhm.
And the question was, if I remember right, well, how we might educate the police department about those and help them, encourage them to enforce those rules. They're the ones who have the responsibility, maybe not always them. Does that make sense? Am I remembering that from the meeting correctly?
Yes, you are. And and Kirsten raised a concern about recent changes following road construction. And it's like, we always make sure that cars can get through, but we don't do as good a job making sure that pedestrians and bikes can get through whenever there's any kind of construction. So maybe that's a collaboration. Maybe it should be improved coordination between the city and developers, or something. There might be a way to phrase it.
I'm not quite sure how to put it either, to capture it all.
I'm mindful. Oh, go ahead.
I'm mindful of the time too. So
Yeah.
I'd like to suggest we get rid of question 11, because this seems to be getting more into social issues like affordable housing, local healthy food, health and human services. I don't see why we would ask this question in an active transportation plan survey. And then just a suggestion. I know it goes kind of against the idea of shortening it, but I thought about asking people a question like, we're always looking to other cities for ideas we can try out in Middleton. Would you support, or how strongly would you support, or something like that? And then list a few options like bringing B-Cycle or other bike sharing service to Middleton, installing physical barriers to separate bike lanes from car lanes, painting select crosswalks green or some other color more noticeable than the current white, reducing Middleton's standard speed to 20 miles per hour. I've had people bring that up, and installing more permanent speed monitors to try to slow down vehicle traffic.
Raised
I like-
crosswalks, raised crosswalks too.
Crosswalks would be another. And Mark, I can send you these if you want
I already typed it all, but thank you.
Good idea. Good idea.
83 words a minute, 20 years ago, so.
to.
I love that idea, Lisa. That's absolutely excellent. And if anybody has any other ones to add to that list that she just mentioned, just email me individually. I think that is spot on in terms of policy prioritization.
Raised crosswalk would be the only other
Yeah,
one.
I put that one on there too.
Cool. Real quickly regarding going back to, and I agree with Lisa, questioning the graffiti and crime. The only thing I could see us using that for is to, especially when we're going to homeowners and business owners trying to prove that paths do not increase that, because a lot of people are fearful that it will increase graffiti and crime, having a bike path or bike trail go through, or pedestrian trail. But in fact, all studies show that it decreases. That would be the only reason I'd want to keep that in, but I don't know if we would be able to use this survey when we do approach people for eminent domain or right of way.
Good
To
comment.
show them our results. You know what I mean? I prefer the studies, the national studies, when we go door to door and talk to people. But that would be the only purpose of keeping those things in, is that when we're trying to get right of way from property owners.
Yeah. I guess I see your point, Kirsten, but I feel like someone going through this survey might take the reduce crime and reduce crime certainly out of context. Like they might not regard it in the context of an active transportation plan, and just, everybody's gonna be like, oh yeah, that's a top priority. And I think Alder Kalish knows this too, as an older person, that this, public safety in most people's minds means stop crime, and same with reducing litter and graffiti. I think that could be taken out of context out of the transportation context too. It also could inadvertently introduce the thought that some of our transportation options cause crime and, contribute to crime, litter, and graffiti. Certainly the bus stops, give people another surface on which to spray paint. So yeah, I just feel like, I don't know. I
prefer using the national studies anyway.
Yeah.
They're more proven.
Yep.
I just want to make one comment on maybe two on question 11. And that is the first half, as Lisa said, really deals with, perhaps things that are outside the realm of this committee. And even there, though, I see them asking two things. One, really, the first part of the question really is about availability of these things, and the other is your accessibility to them. And maybe there are things we're not interested in here. But the bottom three questions, and I ask, maybe this is something that we are interested in, has to do with, shared use paths. And I don't know if it's somewhere else. And I just bring that up, that's the one thing that does seem more relevant here. And the question are we getting that information somewhere else in the survey? And if not, is there a place where that could be added about shared use paths? Because that's the pedestrian piece. The other, I would agree, has to do with services that perhaps that has to do with whether they're available and whether they're accessible. But I'm not sure that's all that relevant to us here. But the second part, I guess I ask you, Mark, if that's something you want to get at, and is there another place, a question that could get at that could be put?
Well, the question that I think Alder Nairo was advocating be added, would you support, or how strongly would you support things like bike sharing, installing physical barriers, protected bike lanes, painting crosswalk screen, etc. Maybe as part of that, we would say maintenance of or paving of shared use paths, or making, maybe there's a policy question there that I think you're getting at. I don't know, Lisa, how do you feel about that?
I could go either way, have that, how would you support these things, be a separate question, and then just rephrase a lot of this question 11 to get rid of, like Stephen said, the top 5, I guess it is, and ask people, I think, what is it? Please indicate your level of agreement or disagreement with the following, and then just get rid of the I have safe and convenient access to, because that's not the lead in to those last 3.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. I know.
I'll send you a
Several of
couple
you.
more comments through email then, Mark, okay?
Okay, well, I don't mean to, I'm not, it was Alder Kalish, I think, who said he had another meeting, and I know, Steve, you had something going on. And Kirsten, I think you said
5
that too.
o'clock. Yep. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Thank you.
All
This meeting's
right.
adjourned.
Adjourned at
Bye.
1:07.
Adjourned.
All right. Thanks, Todd.
Bye.